what's interesting, and I thought about this a little bit yesterday, is that every speaker that comes here, they are like a cog. They are a piece of a well-built timepiece. They are a part of that. And what's interesting is all these pieces are coming together in this timepiece, and it's a beautiful thing. And very, very interesting today, Mr. Chris here, he's going to be bringing a topic for his 025 Linemen Safety National Webinar called Blending the Generations. And it's a topic that we must listen to, we must engage in and understand. So I'm very excited about his topic that he's bringing to the table. But real quick, just want to let everybody know that next month we've got Mr. Mark Forrester coming in and Mrs. Emily Wilkins coming in. She's going to be talking about bridging the gap in training between apprentice and experienced line workers. She'll be on the 16th, and that'll be the 027 episode. Mark's going to be talking about the substation craft with his 026 Linemen Safety National Webinar episode. So these are all, you guys can obtain these. There's zero cost. The Bird Electric, they pay for it. They endorse Mr. Chris to be here today, and they are giving back to the industry freely. And all you need to do to participate and receive all of our safety webinars is to email me at safetytraining@biermeters.com. That's all you got to do. September, we got Mr. Jimmy Vaughn coming in, and we got Miss Jen Miller coming in also in September. So we got a full booked up schedule now until March of 2024, all booked up. So 2 speakers every month. So with that, Mr. Chris, thank you, brother.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Appreciate being here. Thanks to Bierer Meters for having us and letting us join the great cause that they have in safety. And we're glad to be a part of that. So we'll get started on my topic is blending the generations. So we'll get started. So have you ever heard anyone say they have no work ethic? Or why do they need so much attention? Or maybe they just don't get it. Working safe is the last thing on their minds. And I'm sure you can think of a million other comments that's been made over the years that you've heard when it's talking about somebody. So we're going to figure out why people have no work ethic, or why they don't get it, or working safe is the last thing on their minds. There's a benefit to understanding the generations, and especially the difference in the generational differences. Better communication helps build a safe workplace. Also, new employees are more willing to work and stay hired on and stay with your company. There's an increased productivity and teamwork. Also, it's targeted motivational methods. When you target their motivation, you can figure out how to get more out of people. Also, you can have a broader talent pool. Instead of everybody being the same, now you can broaden your talent pool and pull more resources from people. Also, you can foster new and different ideas. With the different generations, we all have different thoughts. I'm 50 years old, so my thoughts are a lot different than my son, who's now 23. But if we work together, using his thoughts, my thoughts, we can come up with something totally different that's still going to work for what we need it to do. Our objectives of this talk is to demonstrate the impact of generational differences in the workplace. Also, learn the characteristics of each generation and how to work with those differences. And we're also here to understand differences in generational motivations and attitudes, to generate strategic initiatives that will improve cross-generational teamwork, making a safer workforce by working together. So what shapes the generation? Accidents, events of history, technology, globalization, a tidal wave of information, growing diversity, and also new career paths. Each one of these things shape the generation. And we're going to dig more into each generation. So the generations in the workplace, you have traditionalists. At this point in time, there are 0% traditionalists left in the workforce today, because these generations were born between 1928 and 1945, and their teen years was 1941 through 1964. So in 2023, they're 95 plus years old. Okay, they've either left us or they're enjoying the last years of their retirement. Our baby boomers, 19% is what's left in the workforce today. So they were born between 1946 and 1964. In their teen years, they were 1959 to 1983. So in 2023, they're between the ages of 59 and 77. So we still have some that's still in the workforce, some that are getting into early retirement, and some that have long retired, or still working as consultants, you know. And what's important with this generation is we need their knowledge. They're starting to leave the workforce. So we have to rely on the knowledge that they've had and their experiences to keep things moving along. And then we have Gen X, who was born between 35% is in the workforce. So they're born between 1965 and 1980. And their teen years was 1978 to 1996. So they're at the average age of 43 to 58. So for me, being 50, I'm a Gen X. That's my generation. So we have our millennials, or Gen Y. 40% of them are now in the workforce. Born between 1981 and 1996, their teen years was 1994 to 2000. So in 2023, they're between the ages of 27 and 42. Okay. And then Gen Z, this is the new generation. So 6% are now in the workforce. They're born between 1997 and 2012. Their teen years are 2008 and 2014. So in 2023, they're between the ages of 11 and 26. So they're starting to get, you know, the teen workers and also in the young generation of working. So this breaks down kind of our generations that are now in the workforce, and now you can see how the percentage differ between the generations, how they're starting to retire, fall off, and the new generations coming in. So let's talk about traditionalists. We understand that they're not in the workforce anymore, but they did bring some values, some morals to what we did. This is our grandparents, our great-grandparents. So traditionalists, they lived through the Great Depression. They lived through the New Deal. They also had the creation of Social Security. Also, they lived through Pearl Harbor and were part of World War II. So all those things that they've lived through had to shape their generation into what, and then shaped our generation. Some traditionalist icons were Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, Judy Garland, Elizabeth Taylor, MacArthur, and General Patton. And if you think of each one of those people, you know, we still talk about them today. You know, if you're a baseball fan, you know the name Joe DiMaggio. You know the name Babe Ruth. If you're into movies, you know the name Judy Garland. You know, Elizabeth Taylor, MacArthur, and General Patton. You know, if you've been in history, you've heard those names. Our baby boomers, they were part of Vietnam. They had Woodstock, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the assassinations of presidents and the attempted assassination of presidents. They had the air raid drills in school, the duck and cover. And also they were part of Watergate, you know, involving President Nixon. So their influences were John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, the Beatles, and Rolling Stones. And you'll find that a lot of my references are music. Love music, so I'll sneak some music stuff in there for you. But again, how did those history events affect the baby boomers and how they are? Generation X. We had the stock market crash of the 80s. We had the Reagan era recession. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. We had the AIDS epidemic. We were the first generation to have MTV. And we have the highest divorce rates within our generation. Our icons were Ronald Reagan, Nelson Mandela, Madonna, Michael Jackson. Generation Y, they have the internet. They lived through 9/11. Columbine, Virginia Tech, the school shootings. They had mad cow and the avian bird flu diseases, and mobile phones started being a big thing then. So Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Bill Clinton, and their parents are the biggest influencers of Gen Y. Generation Z now has social media, smartphones, iPads, they're racially diverse, and they've had COVID. So icons of Generation Z is Molly May Hogue, hope I pronounced that right, Beauty Works, Emma Chamberlain, Kylie Jenner, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So right there, when you look at where we've gone from having the different no technology, you know, basically newspapers, telegraphs, just very limited information, to now having the iPads, smartphones, social media. We have unlimited information at our fingertips all the time. So how does that form those generations compared to the others? So we have work assets. So our baby boomers were good at seeing the big picture. They were good team players, and they would go the extra mile. Generation X, they adapt well to change. They're eager to learn, and they value information. Generation Y is goal-oriented. They're good at multitasking, and also they're technical. Generation Z is highly independent, and they're collaborative, and they're highly analytical because of all the social influences around them. They become analytical. They work together, but it's through social medias, you know, collaborative electronically, and then they're highly independent. And the independence becomes probably from COVID, where they had to learn their finished school online at home, doing it on their own. Some work liabilities. Baby boomers expect everyone to be workaholics. They dislike conflict and they're self-centered. Generation X dislike authority. They lack people skills, and also they dislike rigid work requirements. Generation Y is inexperienced, they're impatient, and they lack the skills for dealing with people, with difficult people. Generation Z, they lack communication skills. They're anxious, and they have a difficulty feeling motivated. And again, think back to what they've had to deal with, the Generation Z, you know, a few years back, and you can see why they're anxious, why they can't deal with, they have difficulty feeling motivated, or why they lack the communication skill. So we're going to take time now to create your own generational profile. So I'll ask you some questions, and you can either write them down or think about them. But one thing is your company outlook. Are you diverse? Are you optimistic? Are you skeptical? Are you hopeful? And then take that and write down what you are. Your work ethic. Are you unprepared? Are you driven? Are you balanced? Are you undetermined? Pick which one you are. Your view of authority. Are you cynical? Do you have that love-hate relationship with authority? Are you unimpressed? Are you friendly? Pick which one you are. Your leadership style. Are you an activist? Are you competent? Are you a consensus type person? Or do you like pull together? Your turnoffs: skepticism, political incorrectness, cliche, intolerance. Pick which one you are. Your communicating methods: social media, touch tone phones, voicemail, or text message. Which do you prefer? Your personal outlook: are you independent? Are you optimistic? Are you a consensus type person? Or are you networked with other people? Your team style: are you a partner? Are you the team leader? Are you the coach? Or are you just one of the people that's collaborative in the group? And then your contribution to making the workplace safe: is it a democratic method? Do you want the team to succeed? Do you work safe for time off? Or do you accept older leadership? So once you've created a generational profile, now let's check them out. So company outlook: if you're an optimistic person, you were probably influenced, your values were influenced probably by a baby boomer, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, or your parents. If you're skeptical, you probably fall into the Generation X category. If you're hopeful, you're a Gen Y. And if you're diverse, you're part of the Generation Z. Your work ethic: if you're driven, you're part of the baby boomer group. Your Generation X, you're balanced. If you're undetermined, you're Generation Y. And if you're unprepared, you're Generation Z. Your view of authority: if you have that love-hate relationship with authority, you're in the baby boomer group. If you're unimpressed, you're Generation X. If you're Generation Y, then you're friendly. And then Generation Z is your cynical. Your leadership style: if you're a consensus type person, baby boomers. If you're competent, you're independent in thinking, you're Generation X. If you can pull together as a group, you're Generation Y. And then if you're Generation Z, you're an activist. Your turnoffs: political incorrectness is the baby boomer. If it's cliche, it's Generation X. If you're intolerant, it's Generation Y. And if you're skepticism, it's Generation Z. And your experiences: your communication method. If you're back to the touch tone phones, then you're a baby boomer. If you like voicemail and emails, you're more the Generation X. If you're a total text message person, then you're Generation Y. And if you're social media, again, TikToks, Twitter, Snapchat, all the different ones, Facebook, then you're more of the Generation Z. Your personal outlook: if you're optimistic, you're a baby boomer. If you're Generation X, you're independent. If you're networked, you're Generation Y. And then if you're consensus driven, you're Generation Z. Your team style: if you lead the team, you're a baby boomer. If you like to be the coach, then you're Generation X. If you're a partner in the team, then you're Generation Y. And if you're collaborative, you're Generation Z. And then your contribution to making the workplace safe: if you want the work team to succeed, you're a baby boomer. If you work safe to enjoy the time off, you're Generation X. If you're the first generation to readily accept older leadership, you're from Gen Y. And if you're democratic, then you're Generation Z. And you'll find that as you did your profile, you probably have some of the different generations all within your own profile. You're not going to find you're just all a baby boomer, or you're all Gen Y or Gen X or Gen Z. You have several different values of your work and your leadership skills, and that's all based on how you grew up, how you were taught, how you were led. What values were instilled in you as a kid that you took into adulthood. Hire and stay. So feedback. Baby boomers like feedback once a year. That's your once a year. When you get your performance evaluation, you get your raise once a year. Generation X likes it being periodic. You know, Gen Y likes to be on demand. They want to know they did good right then and there all the time. And then Gen Z, you know, short and compact. They'll probably want to see it, you know, the little award emoji on Facebook. Hey, Joe did a good job. You know, rewards. Baby boomers like the recognition. Generation X liked the freedom. You know, Generation Y found the work meaningful. And then Generation Z is more the financial rewards. And then retention. A baby boomer's thoughts in retention was changing jobs always puts you behind. And you'll find that a lot of the baby boomers stayed at the same career, the same job, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know, because they didn't like change. They thought if you kept changing jobs, it puts you farther behind in what you were doing. Generation X, they thought job changing is necessary. For Generation X to get where they want to be, you had to change jobs. Generation Y, job changes daily. And we're starting to see a lot of that. Remember, at the very beginning, 40% of our workforce is now Generation Y. And when you think about your turnover with your company, how many, you know, your new hires, you know, there's no more commitment to a job or stability. They'll change daily. And this is our generation workforce now. And then Generation Z, they want a good work-life balance. So generational messages, you know. So your baby boomers, they picked up the phone and talked to you. You know, that's how they communicated. There was no lot of computers. There was no social media. There was definitely no smartphones back then. So if they wanted to communicate, they picked up the phone and talked. Generation X started getting emails. You know, so a lot of Generation X will send emails, you know, as their form of communication. Generation Y, now we had the smartphones. So now it's instant messaging, text messages as their form of communication. And then Generation Z is all about social media and communicating through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, you know, all the different forms of communication apps that are out there today. So how do we manage our multi-generational workforces? Because every one of us that are in the job field today, we have you can see we have multiple generational workforces across the board, whether it be our management as the baby boomers, the older group, and the field workers being the younger group, or it's maybe mixed in between. So is this a challenge or is it an opportunity? You know, we can always take a challenge and make it opportunities. So 41% increases the risk of conflict in the workplace. There's a 54% more challenging to manage these employees. 60% enhances our skill set and our knowledge base. And then 71% brings contrasting views to our organization. Okay? So how do we increase the risk of conflict in the work, or how do we decrease that 41% of risk of conflict in our workplace? We have to learn how those generations think. We have to learn how they act. We need to learn how to read and learn how to interact with people again. Instead of thinking how they think like I do, you know, we have to learn to think like they do and understand them and how we can communicate with them to make sure we get our point across. You know, and it is more challenging to manage these employees. But we also have the opportunity to increase our own skill set and our knowledge base by listening and paying attention to those generations and learn from them instead of being stuck in our little bubble, you know, broaden our horizons and learn from them. And then because they bring those contrasting views to our organizations, take that opportunity to learn from that. So how we mobilize our 4-generation workforce? We work out an age profile of your organization work group. We create an inclusive and dynamic workforce culture. We go beyond stereotypes and we commit to act. So we can learn our generations, but unless we commit to try to learn that Generation Y, Gen Z, and really figure out how the younger group works with us, we have to commit to do that or it won't work. We won't be successful. We have to incentivize using inclusive options. And then we have to keep an eye out for age discrimination, of course. We have to recognize when somebody's in the wrong job. So if they have missed targets, if there's conflicts, if there's reduced engagement or reoccurrent negative feedback or low morale, it may not be the person, it may be the person in the wrong job. Little story, we had an employee that I talked to the other day that could go either, within in my division or a different division, and I simply asked him, are you happy here or would you rather be there? Not that I'm going to get rid of the person, but I want to make sure that they're in the job role that they are best suited for, and make sure that's where they can succeed. And if they're successful, then I'm successful, the company's successful, because now we're getting the production, we're getting them to do their job safely and be productive in the process. So we have to recognize when somebody's in the wrong job. So with that could be, a foreman that's maybe not ready to be a foreman, a general foreman, a leader, or even an apprentice. When we go through our apprentice reviews, we have to make sure that apprentice is ready to go to the next step. If not, then we hold them back. And it's not because that they did anything wrong, they're just not ready. That way we would have put them in the wrong job. So we cannot set them up for failure. We have to make sure they're successful. And when we do that, the morale will go up. That negative feedback will turn into positive feedback. They'll be engaged. There won't be any team conflict, and there won't be any missed targets because they're happy with where they're at. They're finding the right job that fits them. So some strategies to develop that talent. Identify high potential employees. Look for those employees that show that potential for greatness, that leadership skills, those abilities that will make them stand out and be a better person. Encourage knowledge sharing and work shadowing. If you've got an employee that you're wanting to move into a certain area, find that leader that's already in that area and start making that person job shadow that person. That way they can be trained by the people that have the knowledge and skills to do that. Incorporate succession into every employee's objectives. There has to be a succession plan for everything. As vice president of Bierer Electric and as safety, then it's my job to find my successor. And then 10 years, 20 years from now, when I say I'm done, I'm retired, they're already ready in place. They've got the same knowledge, they've got the same background. Now they'll bring their own special skills and different, their generational aspects into the job, but they'll be able to do the job and it's seamless. So when I retire or when Joe retires, then the next person who takes over, there's no disruption in the company. Everything is seamless and moves forward. We incorporate that succession into the employees' objectives. We have to make sure they understand that we're going to move them into those roles, and that's part of their objective of their job. Give the employees formal development paths, training, conferences. One of the nice things working with Bierer Meters in this organization here is their training they gives us a formal path to give them development. We can send them to their training and they can learn. Our linemen, they can come out here and they can learn from different people. They're not just being trained by us, they're learning from them. And also have a talent program to develop future leaders. Have systems and programs in place that once you identify these employees, you can start developing them because, like I say, we're at some point in time, we're all going to retire. So the people that are below us now are eventually going to be the future leaders of our companies. And as we retire, if we look back and we look at and go, wow, that company's going to tank or this is a problem, whose fault is that? It's probably ours for not training them or developing them correctly. Hire the right mix in your workforce. You want to identify who you are as an organization and set out your vision. You want to look beyond the checklist of skills for a job. You want to find someone with the skills you need today and tomorrow, not yesterday. Have a well thought out onboarding process in place, and also create development opportunities to foolproof your team. So as we identify your organization, set your vision, that's going to help you set your checklist of your goals for your job, the skill set needed for those particular jobs. And then where do you see your business, where do you see safety being next year, 5 years, 10 years from now? You know, we drive the vehicle out our front windshield. That's why it's so big. We don't drive by the rear view mirror, which is small. So always be looking forward, so that way your vision and where you're going is a lot better, and you plan for that, not what you did yesterday. In your onboarding process, make sure it's top notch. Make sure your training's involved in onboarding, and that way when there's systems, goals in place, so when the employee leaves your onboarding process, there's no questions of what their expectations are. And then development opportunities to foolproof your team. Create your team, you create your plan, and then through your multi-generational, the paper, that the assessment you did, you'll understand your team, and you can develop the plan and your opportunities for those different generations in your workforce to be successful. So to manage the multi-generational workforce, you have to create employee support training programs that appeal to all learning types. So we have the ones that can sit in a class all day long, Generation X, baby boomers, don't mind the lecture type, but you also may need to have some online skills, online training, because that Generation Y, Generation Z, was more electronic than in person. Ensure that your career paths are available for everyone in your team and your work group. And then be prepared to teach the practicality of emerging technologies. So you may have a person, a baby boomer, that you want to promote to, say, a foreman. Well, as a foreman, they may have a lot of forms to fill out, a lot of stuff that's now electronic. That person may not be as computer savvy as this other person, but the skill set makes this guy a foreman. So you may have to be prepared to teach some practicality stuff of technology to this guy to help him be successful. Just don't throw a computer or a phone at a guy and say, here. There has to be some training involved, especially when you figure out your generations and how they are within that scope. And then introduce flexibility in technology in the workplace, and then consider making policies more adaptable to all generations. So when you're creating your policies, think about the generations you have in your total workforce, and then make sure those policies fit each one of those those generations. So how do we manage baby boomers? So we have to develop them. We have to help develop future leaders. So they're going to be the ones you're developing those leaders. You're going to use their knowledge and their experiences in the workforce, in their own personal lives, to help train those people. They have to be the coach and the mentor. They're not going to be as physical as what they used to be. They're getting up there in age, but they can still, utilize their abilities, their experiences, so they become great coaches and mentors. We have to make sure they share their knowledge. As this generation retires, if we lose that knowledge, we lose a lot in just the knowledge that they have. And they have to share their visions for the projects. Don't be afraid to ask a baby boomer their opinions, get their ideas. As wacky as they may be, there may be some value in those because of their experiences. They probably have been there, done that before. So some strategic questions that you want to ask baby boomers, or you want to ask: are there any talented baby boomers considering retirement in your organization? Are valuable knowledge, skills, or wisdom lost as this generation retires? Absolutely. Are baby boomers included in your mentoring and coaching opportunities? Do baby boomers understand the need for these future generations? Or are they just thinking about themselves and their retirement? Do the younger generations feel comfortable asking them questions? You know, we all have that one foreman or that one general foreman that was always grouchy on a job. You know, well, were you afraid to ask questions because of the attitude or the perception that he put off just because of the way he was? You know, they may be afraid to ask questions. We have to get over that. We have to be able to ask those generations those questions in order to get that knowledge from them. Managing Generation X. We provide opportunities for deeper understanding of areas that will be critical to their success. We have to make sure that we provide opportunities to make them successful. We have to foster an understanding of the generational perspectives, and we have to engage in teamwork. Because remember a few slides ago, they're the teamwork guys. They like to be part of the teams. They want to be successful. And then provide them with opportunities to be mentored. You know, pair them up with that baby boomer, you know, because they're so close in that generation with experiences and values that they can open up to each other and get that knowledge. And then that Gen X person can then share that knowledge on down the line. Some strategic questions. Are there less opportunities for promotion that this generation expected? Have the different types of work been provided to increase Gen Xers' talent or skills? How well integrated are learning and work? And are they getting mentored and coaching as needed? Are we forgetting this generation? As they start to retire, they're in their later years, are we missing the skills, and are we just forgetting this generation because we're so focusing on the Gen Ys and Gen Zs that this is they're just kind of lost in the shuffle. So make sure there's opportunities for Gen Y people to be promoted, to be successful. Make sure we have them integrated in our learning and our work processes. And we have to make sure that they're getting the mentoring and the coaching that they need to be successful as well. And then managing Generation Y and Z. We have to mentor and coach these generations. We have to make sure that they have somebody who's constantly with them, coaching, mentoring, and pushing them along. We talked earlier before the podcast started about restaurants after COVID. You know, nobody showing up for work. Still a problem today, probably somewhere. You know, so we have to make sure these generations are constantly being coached and mentored. We have to understand the roles the parents have played in the lives of these generations. A lot of these generations are single parent, been raised single parently. You know, that makes a difference on their outlook, makes a difference on things. How, you know, what opportunities did these generations have, you know, growing up that are different, and that plays into how they are today. We have to make sure they understand the importance of safety in their work. You know, everything we do has to be safe. From waking up to going to bed, we have to be safe all day long. Nobody wakes up in the morning, I'm going to get hurt today. Everything we do is about safety. So when we get done, we go home the same way we came to work that day. We have to cultivate an importance of strong teamwork. We have to make sure they understand that there's a team, we're partners in this, and we all work together. It's not them versus the world, and it's not us versus them. We're a team. And we have to help them understand the context of the work and get the big picture. As we learned earlier, Gen Y and Z are not big picture people. They're focused right here in the then and now. So we see the big picture. We have to make sure they understand it too, because they're only focused on what they're doing at the present, and it may have a negative effect on the big picture. So we're telling them, no, don't do this. Well, they get aggravated, they get mad because they don't see the big picture like some of the generations do. So we have to explain the context of the big picture so they get it. And then give them different tasks to perform. You know, they're so used to, again, their different social medias, so much information being brought in by the society and technology, so they're probably not very repetitive people. So give them different tasks to perform. And maybe they'll find a task that they really excel at, and that's where you can put them. Again, that's where we find the right job for the right people. So some strategic questions for Gen Y and Z. Are leaders trained to coach these younger generations? Have we set up the baby boomers, Generation X, as the leaders? Have we set them up for success to be able to coach these younger generations? Do we have those right people in place? Can current Gen Y employees become peer leaders for new hires? As Gen X, my generation, is so close to the baby boomers, Gen Y and Z are so close together because of the technologies and the way they were brought up in the world. So can we employ Gen Y people in our orientation process to become peer leaders? Maybe that's the mentors we need to give them instead of sticking them with some old guy, you know, somebody that's more closer to their generation. But we have to make sure, if that's the case, then that Gen Y has the safety values of the company that we are, to make sure that they're mentoring in the right way. And then, can we identify other crew members who want to mentor these generations? Are there people on your crews, people in your employ, that would be good at mentoring these different generations, who have that understanding of the generation? And then these generations feel comfortable speaking up on the job. Would you feel comfortable as a baby boomer to go out to a bunch of Generation Z and speaking to that group? Do you understand that group? Or vice versa, does a Generation Z person feel comfortable going to a room full of baby boomers and Gen Y and speaking? And do these generations understand that if they don't complete a job safely, that they have failed? Everything we do is about safety. If we have a failure in safety, then we failed. So as all the generations need to understand that if we don't complete the job safely, then that job's failed, or that task has failed. Nice thing is, tomorrow's a new day. That's a fresh start, and we move on. But if something's not completed safely, it's a failure. So we want to have an individual action plan. So we want you to write down 3 things that you'll definitely do different as a result of understanding the generations. You know, moving forward from today, knowing what you've learned now, what are you going to be able to do differently to be able to appeal or work with those different generations? So some immediate actions: you can analyze what generations you work with. Look at your workforce. You know, Bierer Meters can think about what their workforce is inside their company. You know, analyze those generations. Then audit your internal communication skills. How do you communicate with those different people? Is it memos? Is it voicemail? Is it, text messages? How do you communicate as a group? And then enhance your coaching and your mentoring across all those generations. Pick the people of the baby boomers, the Gen Y, that are your leaders. Send them to different conferences or perform different classes on mentoring. Make them coaches so they can go out and talk to the other generations. So this will conclude my presentation. Again, it's one of those where we all have a diverse workforce. Our generations span from, again, the baby boomers all the way to the new Gen Zs. And we have to figure out how we can work safely and be able to work all those generations together to be successful and to provide leadership and skills to all the generations, so that way we're training the Gen Z people to be our next leader. Thank you for your time.